Hello, I'm Lou Cerny, Vice President of Sedlak Supply Chain Consultants, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our 5th annual Lunch and Learn series. This is the last of 5 sessions that we've presented throughout the year. Our previous sessions can be viewed on our YouTube site, and I encourage you to also visit our website at www.jasedlak.com. We also welcome any suggestions on topics that you would like to see presented during our sessions next year. Feel free to reach out with any of those suggestions. Now, each session is intended to provide insight into the services that Sedlak and our trusted partners like Barrett can provide to address your supply chain challenges. The session today is intended to be interactive, so we encourage participation from those in attendance. Feel free to ask a question during the session. The microphones are in fact live, but we do ask that you mute when you're not asking a question. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Michael McGreal from Sedlak, who will moderate this session. Michael?
Thank you, Lou, and good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on your time zone. As Lou mentioned, I'm Michael McGreal. I'm a Director of Client Services at Sedlak. I've been with Sedlak for over 45 years. I started in college and worked my way through college at Sedlak, and was such a great firm. I stayed on for the rest of my career here. So Dan from Barrett is with us as well. Dan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Michael and Lou, and great to see everybody on this Lunch and Learn. Can't believe it's been 45 years, Michael. So I'm Dan Klemker. I'm a Vice President of Customer Solutions with Barrett Distribution. Joined Tim and Art Barrett a couple years ago, having known the company for quite some time. As a matter of fact, in full disclosure, I worked at Sedlak Consulting from 2006 and 2012, where Barrett was a customer of ours. So met the Barrett team way back when. Been in this space as either a consultant, as a provider, or trusted advisor for not quite as long as Michael or Lou, but the past, let's call it 25 years. So really excited to share this topic with you. And the reason it's titled How to Select the Right 3PL for Your Company with right and your italicized is because there's a number of different ways to do this. There's a lot of thoughts on how to pick a 3PL. And so what we hope to cover here is all the different methods and processes and decision-making criteria that most brands are encountering. So with that, I think we've done the intros. I'll move on to a slide that Michael will take over right now.
Thank you, Dan. So first, an overview of Sedlak before we get into the 3PL discussion with Dan. Sedlak is a family-owned business founded by Joseph Sedlak 65 years ago and is in the 3rd generations of owners right now. We've had over 2,500 projects in our history and an average tenure at Sedlak of over 20 years. So we've got a lot of experience, lots of projects, and we focus on everything in the supply chain, from network analysis and supply chain studies, facility planning, operational design, operations improvement, IT solutions, WMS, LMS, labor management systems, transportation management systems, ERPs, everything associated with the supply chain. If it has to do with distribution and the operations and material handling equipment, we get into those IT systems. We also are experts at project management, change management through the projects that we oversee and work with our clients on. And lastly, but not leastly, we deal with third-party logistics providers and provide our clients with services on the 3PL front that Dan will cover here today. And next slide, Dan. So our projects, typically range from small operation audits of existing sites to distribution networks of new multiple DCs and millions of square feet, so small to large. We typically have a project management role in especially our larger projects and guide both teams from Sedlak, our clients, and vendors from strategic planning through technical execution. You know, our projects are normally divided into phases. First phase being conceptual design, where we gather a lot of data, analyze data, determine which concepts are appropriate for the application in all the various types of industries, whether that's wholesale, retail, B2B, omni-channel, apparel, hard goods, healthcare. We really are experts in all those industries. Also in phase one, we look at material handling solutions, IT solutions, and determine what are the appropriate concepts to go forward with. Then we move into phase two, where we call that a detailed design and selection process, where we usually run a competitive bidding project for the material handling equipment, and IT solutions will write specifications. We'll draw out detailed engineered drawings, gather bidders, develop specifications to go out to bid, and work with our clients to select the best bidders for the project. Then in phase three, it's all about the implementation of the project, which we typically manage multiple vendors, integrating multiple equipment and systems. Throughout the implementation, we keep the project on schedule, on budget, track open issues, all those project management activities. We also get involved with the actual implementation in terms of testing, training. We'll roll up our sleeves on all of the work that has to be done, in testing, whether it's IT, systems testing, training, equipment testing, volume testing, all those types of activities that occur during the implementation we're involved with. And finally, in phase four, after go live, we stay on to make sure that the systems being implemented work according to the specifications. We deal with any issues and make sure that the systems are efficient and gather the returns that were expected from the initial design. So that's our process in a nutshell, Dan, if you're ready to flip over. I'll introduce Dan Klinkar again, is going to cover how to select the optimal 3PL. So Dan.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate the background. Just two quick slides on Barrett. So Barrett is also a family-owned business. Tim and Art are the sole proprietors of Barrett. Their grandfather started the business in Franklin, Massachusetts over 80 some years ago. What was known for a long time as a small family-owned warehousing company has seen some pretty significant growth, especially over the past 15 years, as they branched out not only in locations, but also in different services that they provide. So traditional warehousing, storage, retrieval of pallets, cases, and whatnot. We actually support a lot of different channels. So if you think of multi-channel fulfillment, it could be direct to consumer with Amazon or e-commerce. It could be retail store replenishment, or it could be wholesale fulfillment, which could be to a Macy's, a Target, or a big brand. So many channels and then many nodes in the network. So our core services are multi-channel fulfillment, regardless of channel, technology with visibility in a very, very nice tech platform, as well as managed parcel and transportation services. Again, the industry focus is in apparel, footwear, consumer products, retails, cosmetics, but also in the food and beverage industry. We've got a number of different facilities across the country, again, being headquartered in Boston. We've got a nice presence up and down the East Coast from Boston, Jersey, and Baltimore. We've invested heavily into the Memphis region. So currently 7 buildings in and around the Memphis, Olive Branch, and Byhalia, Mississippi area. 2 buildings in Dallas, and then 2 out in California. So we're able to serve our clients from pretty broad network of facilities encompassing all total about 8 million square feet. So that's all you're going to have on a commercial from Barrett. You can go to barrettdistribution.com to learn more. So before we get into how to select a 3PL, the first question usually is, should I insource or outsource my fulfillment? If I'm a brand, what's the best way to ship products to my customers? And you'll see there's, at the end of this, there's a saying that there's no one way, and there's really not a right way. There's the right way that's for the company. If you have or want to develop that experience and that core competency in-house, there's a lot to it. There's infrastructure, there's capital, there's operations, there's supply chain, there's automation, there's a lot of options. So a company that really likes to build things and wants to own that process, just like product development, merchandising, marketing, etc., they tend to either keep that in-house for all or a portion of their fulfillment. Other brands or retailers or startups or companies that want to focus on building their business think that it's better left in the hands of somebody else. If they don't have the infrastructure in place, they don't want to spend capital on a building, they have no idea what it takes to really invest in fulfillment solutions for specific channels, much less leverage the strengths of buying power for 3PL. They leave it to the experts. The quote I have on the bottom is an actual quote. It was in a meeting with someone, a brand that was starting up their e-commerce distribution, and they were looking at technology, everything from the technology, the website, the fulfillment, and customer care. And one person on one side of the table said, this is so important to us, there's no way we're going to let somebody do this for us. It's too important to our brand. And on the other side of the table, the person literally said, John, you're absolutely right. This is so important to us. There's no way we would want to do this ourselves. We should leave this to the experts. And that guy won. But anyway, it's more of a cultural thing on whether somebody wants to insource or outsource all or part of their fulfillment. Sometimes there's a mixture by location, by geography, by channel, and by expertise.
Yeah, and how common is it for someone to outsource some of the fulfillment rather than all of it?
So the 3PL space continues to grow. There's a study from Armstrong Associates that says, people continue to look for ways to look for service providers to do this. In a lot of cases, someone will start with their fulfillment in their backyard, right? Especially a startup brand, they've got their office, they're headquartered in the Northeast or California or the Midwest or the Southeast, and they want to really have their products in their backyard. If, for example, they start on the East or the West Coast, and then they're inbounding from one coast to the other, and then they're shipping back out to either coast, they may find that having a centralized location is more efficient as they continue to grow. Or they may say, hey, you know what, our East Coast building runs well. We know the labor market. We've invested in it. We're doing it ourselves, but we're bringing product in through the Port of Long Beach or LA. And instead of bringing them all the way across and all the way back, maybe we'll put up a secondary node on the West Coast or near the West Coast and operate 2 fulfillment centers, but they don't have any expertise in that market, real estate, labor, and they don't want to be flying all the way across country to do this. So they hire somebody to do an optional or a secondary node. So we've seen that quite a bit, where somebody will operate some or all of their own fulfillment with their own network, and then use a 3PL to pick up a different geography. It could even be Canada or across the pond in Europe.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So let's say, okay, you decided fulfillment is not your gig. you want to invest your resources into your brand, your marketing, your product development, and other things. So you got to find a partner to do this. So where do you start? I threw in a question to ChatGPT a while ago, said how many 3PLs are there in the U.S. and told me there was 69,000. So wow, I've heard studies of 20, 30, 40,000, had no idea. So I guess if you have anything from a 10,000 square foot warehouse, you're included in this list. So a lot of times people are looking for the best option for them. How do you even start with that many? You certainly can't talk to more than a half a dozen or a dozen or so efficiently. So you need to get some help. In a lot of cases, people will just ask friends. It's a service business. So, hey, I need a plumber, doctor, dentist, lawyer. Who do you use? So there's a lot of referrals in the business, or there are other ways to do it depending on the size of your company. And again, there's not one right answer, but there's several different approaches. And I'm going to go through how to segment these options for different types of companies, starting with size and scale. I'll pause, Michael, before I go on to see if there are any questions. If not,
I don't see any from the group.
all right. So here are the three major ways to do it. You can do it yourself. If you have the bandwidth and want to control the process, you can hire an independent consultant like Sedlak. They do this all the time, and they do a very good job of it. They've got the expertise, they've got the experience, they've got the capability and the bandwidth and resources to do it. Or you can go on one of these pay-to-play websites that will help you with the selection, almost like the Angie's list of 3PL selection. So we'll get more into those a little bit later. So you can do it yourself, hire a consultant, or use a website. First thing you should do is identify what your key decision factors are. As Michael explained earlier, like, have you decided where you want this facility to be? Do you want a single facility in the middle of the country? We're on dual node on East Coast and West Coast. Things like scalability. Are you looking for someone, if you're a startup, who can process 50 orders a day, but scale to 10,000 a day, depending on your business? Looking at things like the leadership of the company, the team, and probably most importantly, the culture of the company. We'll get into that a little bit later. Looking at financial model and the financial stability of the company. After COVID, there was such a growth in e-commerce that there was a bit of a gold rush in e-commerce fulfillment and parcel carriers. So there was such market expansion that there were a lot of startups, small companies becoming large, acquisitions, private equity money, investments in 3PLs and 4PLs. So the demand was so strong that a lot of people got in the business chasing that demand. So private equity money funded a lot of growth, and so there are startups and there are companies that have been around a long time. I'm going to keep going clockwise. There are a lot of different ways to look at how to price a fulfillment business. Pricing models, there's cost plus, there's activity based, there's fixed variable. There's a lot of different ways to look at pricing for fulfillment, and sometimes it's really hard to get an apples to apples comparison. So you might look for some help to understand and normalize one pricing model versus another. Just receiving, you've got pallet receiving, single SKU case receiving, mixed SKU case receiving. Stored could be linear square foot, vertical square foot, cubic foot per unit, per bin size, per pallet, per half pallet, all different types of ways of looking at this. At the end of the day, you want to be able to look at total cost of ownership. And then part of the wraps that's all around is like, how does the 3PL communicate with the brand and its product and its inventory and its vendors? So what type of tools, what types of systems, how long does the integration take? What types of reporting systems are available? And again, back to the culture piece, is that a company that's easy to communicate with? Do they have on-site dedicated account managers? Like, who do you call during the process of project management and go live? So these are all the decision factors that are out there, and we help companies prioritize those from most important to least.
It seems like a lot of the factors are pretty daunting when you talk about the different types of contractual arrangements you can have and which would be applicable depending on what size of distribution operations you have, how many square feet, what type of material handling equipment you have, whether it's automated or not, can affect, what type of terms and, and the size of the company seems, like they could be complicating factors.
So, Michael, as a seasoned supply chain executive, you get it. You clearly know all the variables that go into this. So it is, I like to say, it's not as easy as it looks, is it? Because it is a complex process to do fulfillment and do it well and hit SLAs and report on SLAs, because there's so many variables that continue to change. And I like to say it's not a matter of if things will change, it's when they will change. So ask any brand or retailer for a forecast 6 months out, like hopefully you'll get next week's. So there's tolerance on forecast, and we can talk about SLAs. So how you perform and whether the brand is happy with your performance at the end of the day, so they want a long-term relationship, is really about setting those expectations about the information that's needed. And we'll talk a little bit about this with the larger brands who've been established for a long time that maybe have their own in-house distribution, that have gobs of data from SKUs to units per order, everything that a good 3PL needs to size and operate the building, to a startup who kind of looks at you like, what do you mean? What's an item master? I have no idea. Our vendors just throw things in cases and they ship them to you. So, and there's everything in between. So depending on the maturity of the business, the type of products, not to mention any operating or holding characteristics like temperature control, kitting on the inbound, outbound packaging. If it's chocolate and you're shipping it to Phoenix in August, how many ice packs do you need to put in the container so that it goes and it doesn't melt overnight? So there's so many different factors that go into this depending on your business, which is why this is titled How to Pick the Right 3PL for Your Business.
And are you saying there are 3PLs out there that cover all those different types of applications, like the freezer, dryer, cooler, and the pharmaceutical and all of that too?
Yeah, Michael, I can't think of one that does everything, whether it's CPG, e-commerce, footwear, apparel, because everything food or frozen. We do temperature controlled food, like Jelly Belly's client of ours, but we don't do refrigerated or frozen. That's a completely cold chain's a completely different animal. And I would say that those companies have invested in those systems and processes and refrigeration systems to handle a specific niche. I can't think of one that does frozen as well as they do pallets of cornflakes.
Right. So other factors that can make selecting a 3PL pretty complicated. I see.
Yeah, and if the, like in my world, if we're presented an opportunity and it's not a good fit for whatever reason, I'm better served by letting that prospect know we probably are not the best choice for them for whatever reasons, scale, product, cost, timing, technology, whatever it is, and I'd gladly refer to someone that would be a better fit for them. So again, with all the options, not everybody can serve everybody the same way.
No, on a side note, it was pretty interesting you mentioned the Jelly Belly distribution center, because I've seen tons of distribution centers all over the country, and I actually visited one. I think it was up in Wisconsin or something. It was very interesting.
Yeah, it's if the things get too warm, they stick together, and that's not a good consumer experience. Candles is another option. Lotions, some of the health and beauty products. They don't need necessarily air conditioned, but some type of temperature control and monitoring to keep the product quality stored for a long time without degradation. So again, lot that goes into it, making sure that the expectations are met by the brand and their consumers. That's ultimately what we're hoping to do.
Very good.
So we'll start in order of like size and complexity. So for large companies, these brands typically have a lot of data and a lot of historical data, and they can look by SKU, which SKUs sold at what velocity the past 52 weeks of whatever year, and they know their seasonality and their peak spikes, etc. Somebody with 30 or 60,000 SKUs who's been doing this for a long time has a good bit of data. That's great news for them in that the selection, there's kind of a self-weeding out process. Of the 69,000 that are available 3PLs in the market, there's really probably only a handful on the very, very large scale that could handle 100,000, 500,000, 1 million orders a day. And by large scale, that's what I'm talking about. So especially with seasonality and peak to average ratios of certain categories around the holiday peak, you're not going to be able to do that, without some type of automation. And so in order to afford the automation, you got to have some a resource for capital to make that investment. And so whether that's goods to person, mezzanines, put walls, et cetera, there's a lot of different options on technology out there, but it kind of is a self-weeding out process for the very large brands. Having said that, there are very large 3PLs that are publicly traded companies that everybody knows. You see their logos and their names pretty prominently in the market. But there could be a company like a Barrett that may be able to scale for some of those brands that isn't as well known for whatever reason. For medium companies, this is probably where the majority of 3PLs can support these brands. A lot of options. Large companies, mid-sized companies, privately held, publicly traded companies, many nodes in the network, good experience, good leadership, maybe come from industry. So a lot of the mid-sized brands who are looking for a mid-sized 3PL see a lot of options. So how do you pick, right? So one of the biggest decision criteria that we talk about is cultural fit and the leadership of the team. So when you go through the process, you can look at the data, you can run analyses, you can lay out a building with all the units per order and the units per hour that go through the door and how you're going to handle it. At the end of the day, is it someone you're going to like working with? And that usually boils down to cultural fit, communication style, size and fit of the organization, and leadership. So is leadership involved or not? Are they invested in the success of your brand? So sometimes companies that grow from a small brand with a small 3PL, they find that they're now bigger than the smaller 3PL can handle. So they're looking for scalability, either another node or more processes or more volume. So cultural fit and leadership involvement is critical to the decision. Site visits, absolutely mandatory. You've got to go see the building and then meet the team that's going to support you. Reference checks, both direct and also through back channel methods. To see who some of their customers are and their NPS scores and their renewal rates and customer satisfaction. And then, of course, if they have the experience in your market with your verticals, with your type of customers and your type of product. And then for smaller companies, there's some consultants out there. If I'm a small brand and I'm getting going, and I had a friend operate out of their small building or their garage, and I'm ready to scale. Like, how do I start looking? There's some third-party sites out there, again, like an Angie's List, where I can put in my parameters of my business, and they have pre-negotiated contracts with a number of 3PLs, in some cases 100 or 200 or 300 of these. So with their algorithms, they can give you like a recommendation of the top 10, or based on your product, your volume, your SKUs, your timing, your technology, and all that. They'll make a recommendation of 5 to 10 that look like a good fit based on all that information, the matching software that they have, and then you would contact them and begin the process with them. Some have, I would say, very good technology. Some are more pay to play, and it's a little bit more subjective. So you kind of have to make sure that you understand their business model and how they're compensated.
So Dan, I would imagine in what I've seen, medium and small companies don't have as much usable data as maybe some of the larger ones. When you're talking about the order characteristics, peak and average day volumes, handling characteristics, and cubic, volumes and things like that, do you find that's common, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think it's real common, and especially with as many options as there are, oftentimes, people are just looking at price. Hey, I'm a t-shirt company. My business has grown. I need somebody to do my fulfillment. What's it going to cost me? And there's list prices on some sites that you can see for cost per order or cost per storage or cost per startup, but it really doesn't get into the weeds. And in some cases, maybe that's okay. Maybe the brand will say, I don't have the data anyway, so I'm willing to trust that you're a competent provider that can support me. We don't typically operate in that realm. We believe the devil's in the details, and without having that information, and if you don't get the information up front, you're going to find out the information somewhere down the line. So nobody likes surprises. So if the brand decides to choose someone without having all the information, or the 3PL doesn't have that information, they're kind of going out on a limb. So they should just be prepared that at some point in time, something will change, and there will be a conversation about a different process, a different SKU, a different parameter, a different price, a vast service. We didn't know that we were going to get 50 containers with just boxes of product, not knowing what they are. So who does the sort and seg on the inbound, and how does it get stored, versus if you had somebody put all that together and it came all uniform for the vendors. So as much as the brand can align on assumptions with the provider and agree that these are the data elements that we know, and that we may encounter some things down the road, that you agree on how you would handle those down the road.
Okay, so that's good. In terms of maybe growth projections and efficiencies and things like that come along, if somebody asks the 3PL, to say, hey, I want to outsource my distribution, would you just take their current operation and mimic that, or would you look at trying to make it more efficient, and does that lower the cost of ownership for the 3PL?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Michael, and we did not rehearse this, folks. We're in the process of doing that. We just went live with a new brand who was in that situation, and we're in discussions with another brand that our job is not to replicate what they're experiencing today, because what they're experiencing today is not good. That's why they're looking. They can't find inventory. They're in the DC helping them try to help the operators find product, ship product. I mean, it's a mess. And anybody who's been in a very, very tough situation doesn't want to replicate that. So we're trying to show our brands and customers what good looks like, what best in class looks like. And it doesn't mean that it's all fully automated, but it's more that you know what to expect and how to handle their particular situations for their brand. So very rarely are we trying to replicate what somebody's doing today. Because if they were doing it really well and it was working well and it was doing right, it was going well, then they probably wouldn't be looking other than to maybe do a market test and see if there's a better price out there. With respect to price, there's three components that go into pricing 3PL services. There's a cost of the real estate and the property and the storage. There's a cost of the labor, and there's everything in between, how you operate it. So in a certain market, whether you're doing it yourself or you're having a 3PL do it, you should all be paying about the same price. Because if you're not paying the right amount for labor, they're going to leave and go somewhere else for a nickel more. And unless you got a great deal or a horrible deal on real estate, then those components are about the same. So that comes down to efficiency. And whether you do it all manually and it takes 20 people, or you put in some automation, it takes 10. Well, you have to pay for the automation to drive up the UPHs and get the cost of labor down. So that goes into the pricing too. So again, the factors, we want to operate as efficiently as possible, as long as there's ROI to it. Like if there's an ROI to putting someone in a mez and putting AMRs in, or a put wall or put to light or something like that, and we can show benefit and improve productivity, and there's a payback for that, we'll do it. We don't put in automation just to say we got robots in a building. There's only one customer I did that I knew that was doing that, and I was at Sedlak, and we were working with Kiva Systems, and there was a brand. I think they were out in Minneapolis, and we were working with Kiva, and we showed them there was a 10-year payback on the Kiva robots. And the guy said, "I don't care. I want orange robots in my facility so I can show them off." Okay, it was his building. He paid for it, and he bought them. So to us, it's all about ROI and driving efficiency. If the ROI isn't there, and a manual process is better than an automated one because of capital's requirements there, then we've got to look for opportunities to drive costs down, but there has to be an ROI to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let me just remind the audience that we are, interactive here. If you do have questions along the way, please feel free to ask them, or you can save them. We do have a question section at the end, but we're happy to address them as they come along. Hey, Dan, thanks.
Yeah, sure, Michael. There's obviously a lot to it. Appreciate the great questions. And so we'll keep going with some of the other approaches. Here's what I counsel folks on is, like, once you decide that you need a new provider, whether it's a new market or you don't want to do it yourself anymore, or you're in a bad situation, be efficient with the process. Don't drag it out. There's a limited number of providers that can do it. And if you're using a third party to get a referral, or you're getting some help along the way, they should not cast a super broad net, and be efficient with the process. Get as much data as you can up front. Ask for the data. I know it sounds annoying sometimes to ask for so many different data pieces, but if you don't do it up front, then you're going to have to address it somewhere down the road. Growth and forecasts, that's all, the kind of the crystal ball. But it's how will a brand, or how will a 3PL manage a brand's change in operating parameters? The online consumers are very responsive consumers. So you can see today, we see it in the data. We see like a 2x increase in order volume. We go to the site, well, they're having a sale, and it just so happens there's an Amazon sale that starts today, and it's driving some of our customers' volumes. So how do you handle additional volumes and forecasts? You can prepare as much as you can, but if a brand decides, hey, our sales are soft, we're going to have a BOGO or free shipping above $75 or free gift wrapping or something like that, then how the 3PL reacts to that is pretty important. And are they prepared to respond to that? And if so, how? Is it an extension of the SLA? Do you work overtime? There's all that goes into the relationship and the expectations. Again, I talked about cultural fit. being as important as the data. It's really about being as efficient as you can with the process. So back to different ways to doing it. If you have the bandwidth and you have someone who can lead this project, because should be worked as a project, and you have someone with good PMI skills, then they can control the process. It's perceived as less expensive. And the reason I say that is, so if I'm a mid-market brand and I have a consulting firm that says, hey, I can do a 3PL selection, but it's XYZ in price, the brand might think, well, I can do it myself. Okay. I've got a resource, they're available, and they know what's most important to their business. Ultimately, the responsibility is yours in that decision. So hopefully you make a good decision, you'll get good feedback working directly through the process. However, it can be very time consuming and resource consuming. Inexperience can lead to a poor selection, and a poor selection just means you're going to end up having to do it over again in a year or two. How do you prioritize the decision factors? It's not all about cost. If it is all about cost, you're probably going to be redoing the decision in another year. So how you prioritize, if you have someone that has rigorous project management, leadership skills, and good analytical skills, you have a good chance of doing it yourself, but that person has to be available as well. So if you hire an independent consultant, they have a very objective voice in this process, unless they're a pay-to-play consultant or they've got some other motivation to not be objective. But if they're truly trusted by the consultant, you will get a very objective selection and assessment. And if they've done this in the past many times, and companies like Sedlak have, then they know how long it's going to take in man hours and weeks. And if they stick to a rigorous schedule, then you should have a fairly fixed price, with the exception of scope creep or something changes. And that company can help you stay on schedule. They're used to running projects. They're used to staying within budget. They're used to pushing their clients to stay on budget with them, and you'll get an objective result out of that. You'll get a very thorough evaluation. So they know data. They know what kind of data is required. They know what bad data looks like. They know how to cleanse data and put it in a model to make sure it's the right information to be looking at. And they can do the side-by-side comparisons, as I mentioned. So somebody's quoting it on a cost-plus basis, or storage is per pallet versus square feet. They can help normalize those differences in pricing models. So there's definitely an advantage with going with a consultant that's been doing this for quite some time.
Yep, thanks, Dan. And just for the record, Sedlak is objective, and we do like to advertise that we believe this is the least risk option.
And as much as I would like to pay Sedlak to recommending Barrett on everyone, that doesn't always work. So truly an objective experience with a trusted advisor consulting firm. Now, it doesn't mean it comes free. So one of the reasons that I think there are these startup matchmaking services, because they're out touting to the brands, their customers, hey, you need a new 3PL, come to me. You don't pay anything. If a large brand is looking for a 3PL to move a several million unit a year operation to another 3PL, it's worth the fees that they're going to charge and go through the process that they know that they're going to get a very good result. So there's a fixed fee for it. The mid-market brands probably would look at that and say, well, I can't afford that. I don't want to afford that. Let me just go with one of the pay-to-play players. I'll show you later why that's not free. But expensive is a relative term. You get what you pay for. And I would say that for a large brand, if done properly, you get a very good outcome. Here's my take on the pay-to-play companies. Most, if not all of them, have a 3PL that pays them if they win the business. So whether that's a fixed fee or structured percentage of revenue, and that fee, if I'm a 3PL, that has to get built into my cost, just like labor and systems and real estate and everything else. So at the end of the day, there's not an invoice going from the consulting firm or the consultant to the brand, but somehow it gets absorbed into the cost, right? And everybody has the same cost. So it's a service that a pay-to-play provider will offer. And the way they make their money is to get a percentage or a vig or a commission on whoever wins the business. So if you're in the program, then you have an opportunity to be a provider for them. But if you're not in the program, then you would come up as one of the recommended providers. So
how does that usually look, Dan, in terms of I've got a business. Do I, pay by the number of cases or pallets shipped or units picked or, that sort of thing?
For the brand?
Yes.
Yeah. So it can be a number of different ways, Michael. It could be a total cost per shipped unit, or it can be an activity-based model where every time I touch a pallet and I receive a pallet, it's this price. Every month I store a pallet or a case, it's this price. For every order, e-com order, there's an order fee and there's a unit fee. For every B2B order, there's an order fee and a unit fee. For every return I process, it's either a cost per return or it's a labor rate to handle the returns until I figure out how long it's going to take to handle those returns. So that would be a VAS service. So most of the 3PLs have what I would call a variable rate, whether it's some fixed or variable, or it's all variable based on activity. And one of the advantages, the reason that people use 3PLs is because if I'm expected to grow in 3 years, I need 50,000 square feet of space. But in year one, I only need 10. Well, the 3PL is going to be able to support them in that 10,000 square feet and grow with them as they need it. So if you're doing this yourself, you need to go get a 50,000 square foot building, pay for all the empty space until you grow into it, or you pay by the drink and by the space you need as you grow.
So it seems like it's kind of simple with the name, and the terminology, but it does have some complexities to it, it looks like.
In this model,
yes,
it boils down to are the 3PLs that are in that pay-to-play model the best fit for that brand? And granted, if that pay-to-play provider is doing their job and their algorithms are right, then they probably could have a pretty good outcome. And I would say that there's a few of those that are really good. They've been doing this a long time. They just happen to automate it through web technology and using data to do the selection. But if you hire a pay-to-play consultant that doesn't really have sophisticated technology, or they just kind of go out to their friends who they know in the industry, it may not be as objective as you, the brand, need. So there might be some challenges with that.
Okay, thank you.
So this is not an easy process. And again, I like to say, how hard can it be, right? You bring in cases, they hang around a while, and then they leave, as Lou and I have talked about many times. But there's a lot of complexity to it. There's system complexity. There's finding labor. If you've got a high seasonal labor model, the cost of labor continues to go up. The cost of real estate continues to go up. Cost of technology comes down. So all these factors that go into it, it can be very daunting. Literally, an infinite number of options. I think as a brand, I would have to determine, first of all, is this something that I want to take on myself? Do I want to build a core competency? Do I think that I can do it as well as somebody who's made an investment in systems and real estate technology and competence and teams and all these things? Because it's not only order management systems and integrations to a Shopify site to get orders or an EDI site to get orders, but then what happens and how do I distribute those orders to my people on the floor in the WMS. So there's a lot of WMSs out there. Do I run batches? Do I run real time? What about any type of VAS services or things that you need to do on the inbound? Are all the products labeled properly on inbound, or is there VAS that needs to be done on the inbound? Do I need to do any kitting or anything or bundling on the outbound? What type of experience do I want my customers to see? So you could just put everything in a brown padded envelope with a label on it, pretty easy. But if you're a high value brand and you want that unboxing experience to be something that the customer really enjoys, they're going to go put it on YouTube or on the website. Does it have bows or puffy cushions or a handwritten note or some type of fancy pack out that not everybody can do in their systems? I would also say prioritize what's important to you. Is it performance relative to SLAs? So what are the SLAs? And in the contracting process, you'll see what SLAs are, from receiving to put away to outbound to returns, and they're kind of all over the place. So I would say the company that says we'll ship 100% of any order that's received by 11 o'clock at night that day, 100% SLA, I would doubt that. But I think I've seen claims like that because it's cheaper to pay the penalty than to staff up to hit the SLA. So just beware when you're negotiating SLAs that they seem realistic. Otherwise, they're probably too good to be true. Get a demonstration of the reporting capabilities and what types of reports and real-time information are available through these dashboards. And with all the systems and tools available today, most companies have some type of a reporting tool. Make sure that that's configurable to give you the information that's important to you. It's usually inventory, it's units in, it's units shipped, it's back orders, it's cancellations, etc. So just, you can do anything with data. You just want to make sure it's easily configurable to what you want to see on a daily basis. And then we talked a little bit about the price and the pricing model. They could be all over the place, but usually the fulfillment price is going to be, plus or minus a few percent. That everybody's paying the same amount for labor and real estate and whatnot. So the pricing should be within a pretty tight band. And if it's not, you get 10 proposals and there's one way up here and one way down here, then usually it means somebody's interpreting the data incorrectly. So there's a miss or there's an overprice or something. So if everybody has the same data and they're looking at it the right way, the pricing should be a pretty narrow band. And just remember, I get asked a lot of times, hey, is it cheaper to insource or outsource? And some people say, well, if I outsource it, they can leverage their scale and all and everything. So it should be less expensive to outsource. I don't think that's the case. While we have multi-customer facilities and multiple brands in the same facility, for that brand in particular, whether we're using manual systems or AMRs or automation, you can't scale labor. If you have 10 bodies or 100 bodies, you can't say, okay, because we have 100 bodies, they're making less per hour. Like, economies of scale don't work with labor. So just remember that if you're doing it yourself, you pay, the third party pays what you pay in real estate, space, storage, operations, and labor. And the 3PL has to make a profit to stay in business. So whether it's cost plus or activity based, just remember that the 3PL needs to make a profit in order to stay in business and serve your brand well. I think that's the last slide, Michael.
All right. Thank you, Dan. That was very informative. I hope the audience found that very beneficial as well. So we've come to the question and answer period of the webinar. And please feel free to ask any questions. One of the questions I had for you, Dan, was if there are any industry trends in third-party logistics today that you're seeing.
Yeah, definitely. So again, I think people, as they look at the cost to fulfill product for their customers, I think there's an interest in outsourcing, and I think more companies who maybe historically used to doing it themselves, as guys like you and me get older, and people think, where am I going to find the capability and competency to do this? Maybe there's more emphasis paid to developing a brand or marketing or product development or some other type of innovation rather than doing fulfillment. I will say a couple trends are both on the fulfillment and the small parcel side. I think there's been a lot of new entrants in the space since the post-COVID peak in demand. I think we're already seeing some consolidation there. Look, if you don't have scale, you can't possibly get a building and be profitable with a single small site with a couple clients. I think there's going to be some consolidation there. There already is. It's really hard. It's a hard business to begin with, and it's a really hard business to do profitably. So you really have to control your costs and your labor, and all the parameters go into this. I'd also say that one of the components of fulfillment, we talk about the click to deliver, is not only the fulfillment piece, but it's the delivery piece. So from the time that package gets shipped, packed in a box, and loaded on a truck, how long does it take to hit your door as a consumer or as a store? And in the good old days, there was UPS, FedEx, and USPS. And with the spike in demand, there became a lot of new entrants in that space. Regional carriers, local carriers, technology-enabled carriers, Amazon fulfilling now. So if anybody was at Parcel Forum a couple of weeks ago, the number of parcel carrier options has exploded. So just remember, the total cost to perform for a brand includes not only the inbound freight, but also the fulfillment and the outbound parcel. So be aware that there's a lot of options there. That consolidation has already started as well. A couple startups from a few years ago that got into the parcel business are no longer in business. So just beware that that's as important a consideration as the fulfillment, but it's changing quite a bit these days.
I see. One other question. I know you talked a little bit about having a location study that could tell you that you should be on the East Coast or the West Coast for, where your customer base is, or, you're getting things from overseas, you need a port there. And those numbers, have largely to do with transportation costs and such, and a lot of times where you are in the country, where there's labor there and what those labor costs are. But do you have any other subjective type of considerations for locations?
Well, I promised I wouldn't use the T word on this call. Tariffs. So a lot of companies, mid-market companies that were sourcing their product exclusively in China and coming through the West Coast, they have been revisiting that. Over the past couple of years, it's been an ongoing process. Bringing product into Mexico and fulfilling out of Mexico to take care of the 321 de minimis benefits is changing as well. So those types of things will drive decisions. So whether you decide to move your product manufacturing from China to somewhere else, or from India to somewhere else, or wherever it's coming in from, could change where you bring it into the U.S. So we're working with a brand that was bringing everything into LA. Now they're bringing it in New York because they're doing U.S. fulfillment instead of Mexico fulfillment. And so where the product comes into the port and where you're outbound, it's a balanced equation, right? It's not just an outbound equation. You got to balance the inbound with the outbound. So if all your customer growth is up in the Northeast, maybe that positions you further Northeast than middle of the country or West Coast. But if you're a brand that was founded on the West Coast and you're known for the West or the Southwest or the Southeast, that might have some influence in where you put your fulfillment center. And so you've got to hire somebody like Sedlak to do that network analysis, find out what the trade-offs are, because there will be trade-offs. It's not one factor that will determine the best location.
Sure. All right. Thanks, Dan. Before I turn it back over to Lou, who's going to wrap things up, I did not see any other questions before we do that. One final chance to post them. All right, Lou.
All right, well, again, thank you, Dan, and thank you, Michael. We appreciate everyone's attendance today, and again, encourage you, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, and likewise, we look forward to next year when we look to see you all in our sessions as we continue to try and be informative to the marketplace. Thank you, and everyone have a great day. Bye now.
Any chance of asking right now? I'm sorry. Is there any chance of
Oh.
asking some questions? I apologize. I didn't realize they need to be posted.
Sure.
Okay, and I just typed. So, Dan, thanks for all the information. Curious, in your 3PL, is there, if all things are equal year over year, what index do you use for annual price changes?
So there are two primary ones for labor. It's a CPI, so Consumer Price Index dictates what changes in labor are, and then it's the GRIs from the carriers. So
Oh, the carriers. So which CPI do you use, CPI-U or CPI-W?
You're asking the wrong guy,
Okay.
but it's usually the CPI that dictates what the regional labor rate is.
How about then for the real estate, considering what's been occurring with real estate cost?
So for us, we sign long-term leases. Can't speak to everybody else, but most of our leases, Art Barrett himself has signed those leases. So if we're in a long-term situation, we know what our costs are.
Sure.
We're going to be over the near term. That's fine. That's a known factor. If we have a lease coming up and it's getting renewed and the landlord wants a hefty premium, maybe that'll change what we do in that market or with that building.
Well, good luck with that, because if your long terms are coming up for expiration, watch out for the sticker shock, considering what Link is doing and what Prologis is doing.
Yeah, and that was the case, a few years ago when Amazon was gobbling up everything. If you put a bid, you had to act quickly, because Amazon would come up and say, "Hey, we don't know if we need it now, but we're going to pay a premium to go get it." And that was the case when I was working with my previous company, and we were putting up 4 new buildings a year, and the market was just loony. And in cases now, we're actually talking to some brands who they've been in a space, depending on the market, the region, the location, the space where they are, their lease is up, and their costs for real estate are going up 1.5 to 2x. So they're thinking maybe this isn't the right business we want to be in anymore. So we'll outsource that to a third party. They've been able to contain their costs. They put in automation. They've paid for the capital already. They can do the throughput with fewer people, and maybe that's another reason why they look to get out of their current situation.
Right. How about for Barrett, approximate like revenue range? Like what's a minimum, maximum type of revenue range on excluding freight for a client?
For a client,
Yeah.
On minimums, I would say, if we did, 100,000 packages a year, that was fairly small. We have a new program that we just launched this year to be able to support some of the smaller startup brands, like Kalani is one, some others, Lubify is a brand, but startup brands that we're willing to take a kind of flyer on, that they're well funded and they think we think they're going to be like the next UFOs or Johnny O or some of the clients that we have today. So we have, if you go to our website, you'll see there's an accelerator program we kind of piloted this year, and it's actually been very successful. So it's meant to be, we'll take limited data, we'll kind of do some back of the napkin math and get a rate card and be able to ship out within 2 to 4 weeks, do a quick integration. And it's not a 5 or 10 year contract or anything, but it's a 1-year contract. And then if things go well and they're doing well and we're doing well, we would enter something long term. So, I would say our bread and butter is the mid to upper mid market, but we've also positioned ourselves to be able to handle some of the startups.
But if you look at, you mentioned 100,000 packages is fairly small. What are you talking about? $5 a package? I'm just trying to get a dollar perspective on where the fit might be.
So just for fulfillment?
Yeah. Well, for order fulfillment and space, excluding freight, right?
Depends on the product, the units per order, the storage, all that stuff that I was talking about. If you want to talk offline, I'm happy to give you a price. I can't commit to a price without knowing what we're done.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not really looking for a price. I just want to say, it's like, all right, do I include you in the process if the annual revenue is less than $100,000, $250,000?
Sure.
That's what I'm trying to get an understanding.
Give me a call. Yeah, we would be interested in that. It'd probably go through our accelerator program, but some of the brands that we're working with now are in that range.
Yeah. And would you say activity-based is probably your most common method of pricing?
Yeah, it's we price it what our clients want, quite frankly. And the activity base seems like pay by the drink, pay by the consumption. Yep. That seems to work best for them.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for the information.
Yeah,
appreciate
sure.
it. Okay.
Okay, well, unless there's any other questions, again, thank you, Dan and Michael, and most importantly, those who attended the session. Thank you again. Have a good week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Lou. Thanks, Michael.
Thank Dan.
Nice job.